Hey guys, it's Omer from MMOs.com doing a quick weekly news recap of all major MMO news and announcements beginning June 1st, 2020. This is episode number 247 of the recap, and the first of news this week comes from Sega regarding Phantasy Star Online 2, which officially launched in the West in English on PC. We mentioned this was going to happen last week, but it's worth mentioning again, as well as some of the other issues surrounding PSO2, because it is a major PC MMORPG launch. We don't get too many new PC MMORPG launches these days anyway. Anyway, the game is live, and not surprisingly, there are some launch issues, mostly surrounding the game's distribution platform, which is the Windows Store. A lot of players reported problems installing the game, and others had issues launching the game after installing it and playing it without issues the first time. Sega has already acknowledged these problems and that they're working towards a fix right now, but the game is off to a fairly strong launch with these issues aside. I've seen firsthand that the servers are reasonably full. The English localizations though are far from perfect, as the voice acting and lip syncing is hilariously off, but the game's strong launch shows that there really is demand for a new MMORPG. Time will tell though if the game will succeed in the West the way it has in Japan, but it's off to a great start so far, even with its launch issues. And while the game originally launched in Japan in 2012, it just launched here in the West in 2020, but if you never played the Japanese version, it is worth checking out. Next, we have a pretty big update for the North American version of Aion, which launched a Shadows of Valyria update this last week, and it's a big update. Several regions of the game got totally revamped and transformed to new higher-end areas with tougher enemies. There's a new ground instance called Altar of Ascension, 2 new raid bosses, and new gemstone and runestone systems, and much more. The Celebrity Occasion NCSoft is running an event to encourage players to come back to Aion by rewarding them for reaching various milestones while leveling up. If you never played Aion and didn't like PSO2, which just launched recently, give Aion a try, as it's actually not bad. It's more of a traditional MMORPG, whereas PSO2, which a lot of people are playing right now, is more of an instance dungeon, persistent hub style game with the action elements kind of like, DFO and Vindictus. Up next, Elder Scrolls Online's Greymoor update officially launched on PC this last week, and it's off to a bit of a rocky start as players discovered a bug that allowed players who didn't buy the new content to gain access to it, while those who did buy it were left locked out. ZeniMax quickly shut the servers down to address it and kept the servers offline for most of launch day. There's also issues with the new Antiquities system and other systems, but most of the issues should be fixed by now. But anyway, Greymoor is out now on the PC, and the player base has enjoyed a nice little spike. ZeniMax also announced that Elder Scrolls Online is finally launching on Google Stadia platform on June 16th, which we knew this was coming, but we didn't have an exact date until now. The Stadia launch happens just 1 week after the console launch of Greymoor, which is happening on June 9th. Next up, a small bit of news for Crowfall, the perpetually in development crowdfunded MMORPG. The game officially transitioned from pre-alpha to alpha, which doesn't really mean much, as pre-alpha was a pretty bullshit term to begin with. It didn't really mean anything. Anyway, it took them 5 years from the Kickstarter to get from pre-alpha up to the alpha stage, which is a bit ridiculous. Going forward, Crowfall is promising to work on the game's infrastructure and performance, as the core gameplay stuff is apparently largely done. Anyway, this announcement is supposed to be a gesture that the game is making progress, but I have no intention of getting excited for this game until it's actually playable in some kind of open beta form, which I think is still at least a year or two away at the minimum. I wonder what it feels like to be an original backer from 2015. You waited 5 years for the game to go from pre-alpha to alpha. Up next, a Korean game developer Lionheart Studios announced that they're partnering with Kakao Games to publish their upcoming Viking-themed MMORPG, Odin Valhalla Rising. The game will be launching in South Korea first, and given Kakao's experience with publishing Black Desert, I expect there's a good chance Odin Valhalla Rising will make its way to the West eventually, if it does decently in South Korea. The game promises a seamless open-world experience, and given the game's name will obviously be based on Norse mythology. It's also built on Unreal Engine 4, and it looks visually impressive. But given they're just talking about the South Korean launch just now, the Western release is still likely a year or so away at a minimum, but it's a new PC MMORPG, which is always exciting. Next up, a small bit of news for the wildly successful ARPG Path of Exile. The game replaced DirectX 11 with a beta version of the Vulkan renderer, which promises more consistent and smooth performance on all PCs. While it's not exactly interesting in new gameplay-related stuff, performance issues are super important, and while I've never had any issues with Path of Exile stuttering, it's good to see them working on performance-related issues, as I think one of the most important things for games is to be able to run well on pretty much every PC. The more accessible your game is in terms of system requirements, the more players you can potentially have. Next, Lord of the Rings Online launched a pretty impressive event which allows players to unlock all the game's adventure packs, quests, and raids for free. They're giving away coupon codes which can be used to unlock these things permanently on your account, with the coupon being valid until August 31st. If you have any interest in Lord of the Rings Online, this is worth redeeming, as otherwise you have to access this content through the game's cash shop to get these adventure packs. And while the game is an oldie, it launched back in 2007, it's still around and still gets updated pretty regularly. Next up, Terra 2 plans on open playtest on June 9th, with founder packs taking a 4-day head start beginning on June 5th. Terra is a buy-to-play fantasy MMORPG and is a sequel to the original Terra game, which has no relationship, of course, with Bluehole's Terra, despite being vaguely similar names. Now, both Terra and Terra 2 are a little bit unique, as they're both focused on survival elements, so you can kind of craft bases, worlds, and a lot of the crafting elements you'd expect in a game like Rust, but in an MMORPG-like environment. The first game, Terra, was never too popular and only averaged about 54 players online, so we'll see if Terra 2 does well. Next up, in the first State of the Game update for Magic Legends from Cryptic Studios, Perfect World has basically announced that Magic Legends will begin its first closed alpha test sometime in June, likely around June 11th, and it'll accommodate about 15,000 players, so if you're interested in playing Magic Legends in alpha, do check out the game's Magic Legends website and sign up over there. No any kind of full release just yet, but at least it'll be playable in some state in the coming weeks. Our next last bit of news this week is in Blizzard regarding BlizzCon, and they officially announced that BlizzCon is officially canceled, which sucks because they mentioned before they were still considering doing it. It's kind of odd because they're announcing the cancellation after all the coronavirus lockdowns are basically already being lifted. They did mention though that they might do an online-only BlizzCon event early next year, but we'll have to wait and see until then. Anyway guys, that's it from the news this week. I'll see you guys next week. Later guys.